and you'll be fine.
Yes, keep telling.
So now, Nivedita, last time we were discussing the National Defense College, which I just completed, 1977. Before I go on to my next posting, which is as the Brigadier General Staff of 2 Corps. Now, 2 Corps, the second corps is commanded by a Lieutenant General. It has a number of divisions under it, commanded by Major Generals. It's really the basic fighting formation of the Indian Army. It has a lot of clout, a lot of power. And 2 Corps is our offensive formation. So we have a 1 Corps and 2 Corps, both offensive formations. And these are meant not for defense of the country, but for attack. So it's a prize posting. More about it as I come to the scene. But before I go there, I wanted to share with you some of the questions of the type of training we are doing for officers in the Indian Army and in the defense services, I would say. I had spoken earlier about the Indian Military Academy when I was a young boy, and then the National Defense Academy, which was raised in Kharakpasla near Pune. First time in the world where all three services were trained together as boys, and then went to the respective services for commission training. So we are the first country in the world which decided, and that is political wisdom, with the advice of our generals at that time, General Karyappa and General Tamaya and all the very big shots. But decision has to be taken by the government. And it was Jawaharlal Nehru's government. And no matter what else you hear, there was a lot of wisdom, which I'd like to say in the establishment of military training institutions for independent India. So we have the National Defense College, where so we are the first country in the world which established 4 years training, 3 years actually, to give a bachelor's degree in science on the one hand, to Jawaharlal Nehru University, and also to give military training to young boys from the age of 17 onwards for 3 years to of the Army, Navy, and Air Force together. Of course, there are different subjects for the three services, but they live together and they train together and they play games and sports together and so on. And with the result, the friendship between the three services greatly improves. The reason for this is the coordination between the three services, which everybody speaks about even today, which is lacking in many countries. So that's the National Defense Academy. Then you have that's for young cadets being trained. And now then you have the staff college, the Defense Services Staff College when you're a major or something. And the equivalent of Navy and Air Force people also attend this. And the instructors are a mix of all these three services. With the result, you get coordination, right? You do exercises for all three services to be worked together. You make a lot of friends. Now, the third is this National Defense College, where all three services are present, plus foreign officers and some civilian officers, some police and some administration, as well as diplomats do the course with us, but they are very few because, as you know, the bureaucrat and the diplomat think themselves very superior, so they don't want to waste their time doing this sort of training. So they're reluctant to come here, they have to be forced. Now, in this training, how is it that you take a military man who has tried every job in the country and failed to get in? He goes and joins the military as a last resort, as an officer. Now, when he does that, and within 10 years of hard training, there are 2-3 things that happen. A, he becomes a disciplined human being with a great love for service, seva, to the country and to his people. Secondly, he becomes a person with wide knowledge. By the time he's done 10 years service, By the time he's done 15 years service, he can take any bureaucrat on any subject. Especially if he's done the Staff College and the National Defense College. Why? Now, this question was raised to me when I was the Army Chief by Rajiv Gandhi, who was then the Prime Minister. He said, how is it that your colonels and brigadiers can talk down all my bureaucrats? So I said the point with the bureaucrats is they've done a lot of education to start with. They've done masters plus PhDs and all that before they can get into the Missouri Academy, where they do 2 years training and then they join the service. Their hands-on experience is there when they're SPMs and deputy commissioners and things like that in the states, because they're in touch with the people. But once they come into the government, state government, or which is the better part of their career, and when they become senior officers, they are confined to their own job of work. If you see large branches in the government, somebody doing A, somebody doing B, somebody doing C, he's concentrated only on that. Now, there is no time for them to be trained outside the service requirement, which the army does, or rather the services. So I told Rajiv Gandhi, our training is because the mind has been expanded far beyond your normal duty. Why? Because if you go to the staff college as a major or captain, you spend a year away from your official duties on full salary.
Right.
You meet colleagues from other services and your own level of colleagues from other arms and services of the army. There's friendship, plus there's a lot of discussion outside the classroom as well as inside the classroom. The directing staff are only directing studies. The study is being done by you. You're studying a large amount of written material, plus you're studying a large amount of tactical and strategic matters, plus you're studying man management, plus you're getting a large number of speakers from all over the country, from all shades of opinion, to talk to you, and you question them, and your mind opens up to something far beyond commanding a company of infantry or a squadron of tanks or, some service matters. Then when you come to the National Defense College, you're a brigadier by this time. You're sweating for higher ranks. Again, a whole year you're taken away from your normal duty for study. Now the study is based on you. In the National Defense College, for all the papers that we had to study and with the discussions we had to work on, of course, in addition to the various speakers who are coming and speaking to us, you have a large amount of huge libraries. You study the library, you have newspapers of every hue, pro-government, antagonistic to government, for last 30, 40 years is available. And if you ask for some question, the staff will get it for you on the computer. Then you have magazines, which any self-respecting government would hate to see, but they're there for you to see. I'll give you an example. You remember that in the 62 war, when we had a massive failure because of the Chinese attack, the then army chief was a chap called General Thapar. He was sacked. I told you about it. He was sacked in 1962 after the war, and General J.N. Chaudhary of the Armored Corps, who was Southern Army commander, took over as the army chief. This officer, that is Thapar, who, as far as the news is concerned, let India down because, his troops ran away from the Chinese. He's a very top-class officer. You don't reach the army chief unless you are a top-class officer. So what happened? He's a King's commissioned officer. That's commissioned from Sanderson in England. The teaching there is that the politician is the boss because the people of the country have elected. Therefore, if you disagree with the politician, you can put up your objection. If he overrules your objection, you have only one option, that is to carry out the orders with your full vim and vigor, despite the fact that you don't like those orders, or number two, resign your commission and go away. This is the British training. Now we are Indian commissioned officers, our training is different because the British politician has a very good idea of the military services and war. There is no family in Britain who doesn't have either personal or a relative's experience in actual battle. World War I, World War II, many other skirmishes later, right? Anti-terrorist operations in Malaysia, anti-terrorist operations in Borneo and Indonesia. So if you take Winston Churchill, who was the prime minister and ran the Second World War, he could tell off his generals because he was an army officer. He left the military as a colonel or something and then joined the politics. And he has been in battle himself. And he became a reporter for some newspapers. He's been reporting on that from the front lines. So that politician, and for that matter, the American politician, is knowledgeable about the military services. And many of their relatives and their family are in the military services. If you look at India, no politician goes anywhere near the military. He doesn't allow any of his relatives or children or grandchildren to come anywhere near the military because it's dangerous. So he has no idea. And then he's got bureaucrats who have no idea. Become defense secretary responsible for defense of India, but there's no idea in the head as to how this is to be managed. Therefore, there's a contest going on between military headquarters and defense ministry and everybody else. Okay. So now, why have we done that? Because as I told Rajiv Gandhi, I said, your bureaucrats are so superior in their own mind. First thing is knowledge. You cannot attain knowledge if you've got the ego that you are superior. Now, for example, you're a teacher. Look at all your school teachers today and professors. Are they up to standard? I have my nieces, Rashmi, you know her. Her husband has been director of IIT. He's a professor. She tells me you've opened these new IITs, but there are no professors of the standard that is required to teach in IIT. Why? Because from our educational system, that quality of professor is not coming up. Supposing I tell you that all government teachers and professors should have a year's sabbatical on full salary, where they meet with each other in an institution. They discuss the art of teaching. They discuss the art of psychology of how you manage people who are not really manageable and how you bring up children or elder students to study and open their minds and be an example to them to follow in character and conduct. How do you do this if you don't have time for this? You're working all the time. You've got a chart of how to teach it. You're carrying on with it. There's no time for you to really study the issue of yourself and compare notes with other teachers and professors to see what is the best system of carrying out your duties. You do in the army. So Rajiv Gandhi did start for some of his bureaucrats, much against their will, that they should do 6 months in the Administrative Staff College in Ahmedabad. It's a very high-class administrative institution. It's sort of an IIM. And the Ahmedabad is one of the best in the countries. To do 6 months, even that against much objection, then many of them reluctant to go because they've got a pansy job, no responsibility, plenty of authority. We've got to change that. Now, Mr. Modi, I think, is beginning to change it by putting a bit of a danda behind their work. See? So in the military, and I'm not talking only of Indian military, all militaries, there is a very high-class system of instruction to open the mind of the military man, and especially the leader of the officer. Why? Because he's got an armed group of human beings. He can do anything he likes. And India, by the way, is the only country in the whole of Africa, much of South America, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, who has not decided to take over the government. That means the military thinks itself capable of doing so. But the Indian military has decided not to get into that. Despite the fact that Jawaharlal Nehru and his government and many prime ministers thereafter were afraid of the military wanting to take over quietly. Despite many military chiefs, including Tamaya, telling him that there's no such thing. But the bureaucrats want to get that fear into the politician's mind that, look, keep the military away. Don't tell them anything because they might take over. But the military still knows. We know as much about politics and what's going on in the country because we are involved every day in the states with what's going on, and we have very close contact. with the people of the country, and the tribal regions which nobody wants to go to in the distant border areas of India, their development, their assistance, and there's some remarkable people there, as I've described. I described Mizoram to you and their culture. We don't look down on this. In fact, in many ways, it is better than our culture. We have to learn from them. So this training business is what National Defense College is one of the top areas of the Indian Army training up to brigadier level. I must tell you also that we have started courses of instructions for major generals and lieutenant generals also. Because we do believe that you get stuck in a job, you think you know it all, boy, you come here, spend time with your colleagues outside your line of duty to understand where you stand, right? So we've got a management institution in Secunderabad where major generals and lieutenant generals go from the Army, Navy, and Air Force, again, where the art of management. Now, management means logistics, supplies, and organization of manpower relief, organization of replacement of people who are ill or something or get injured. It's a huge aspect. How do you move 30,000 people from point A in the country to the border? The way to manage trains, the way to manage aircraft, to manage things. No business in this country has any idea of the size of the job that we do here because it's a massive army. We can move troops in thousands and lakhs from one end of the country to the other in matter of days. How do you occupy the trains? How are they moved? How are the road opened and how do you convoys move? So all training done right from a young age, but we have management institutions to train the senior officers. More about this, many of them don't know. Now, many people feel, so did I when I was a young man, that what is important is the operations on the field of the battle when you are facing the enemy. What is the tactics and strategy to employ to, if not victory, at least to get better off at the end of the uh, conflict than the other guy, and to save the honor and integrity of your country. More than that is, how do you supply those people? Now you take Ladakh, for instance. How do you supply food? How do you supply clothing, arms, ammunition, artillery guns, tanks, heavy weapons? It's a massive supply organization. There's Ordnance Corps, Army Service Corps, everything. But as I described also, when I was talking about being the Colonel GS of the Armored Division during the 1971 war, how I had to make friends with those responsible for supply and transport and those responsible for repair of tanks. Because of their efficiency, that we can function, otherwise we can't. So one has to respect those organizations of the military that are masters of the game to give to you the supplies and the troops and the provision of ammunition and everything else at the point of requirement as you require for your tactical aspect. Now, this gives you a lot of training of how to manage human beings and how to manage colleagues. I told you about Mizoram, where unless you are one-to-one with the civil administration, with the deputy commissioner, with the intelligence guy, and amongst of people, and the police, you don't achieve. In other words, I quote a famous German general called Heinz Guderian, Field Marshal Heinz Guderian, who did the German advance in World War II from the borders of Germany right up to Dunkirk and forced the British Army to get into ships and run. He said, fist, no finger. If your hand is like this, fingers, there's no strength. You put a fist, everybody's together, all the 5 fingers. Punch. So this training of NDC is like that. I must tell you a few things. I told you that when I was in the National Defense College, we not only visited the whole country and saw the industries and the way politics functions and the way industries function, why government industries are failing to make profits, why private industries are making profit. No, we went into all that. And I must digress a little. We had visited Cochin, where there was a brand new petrochemical industry set up by the government. latest equipment. And our task was that after Cochin, we would visit Goa, the Zuari chemical industries, who are also got a petrochemical industry, ancient, ancient setup, about 30 or 40 years old in design. They were making 100% profit, and the government institution was not making any profit. So when we went there, I didn't tell you this part of it. On the first day, the people in charge, who themselves didn't know what to do about this fact that it was not making profit, had invited a top American oil man from Texas in US, who owned a large number of Texas oil fields, who had come to Japan to give them advice for one day. He charges 30 lakhs of rupees per day for his advice, because he's earning more than that in Texas. He said, every time I keep away from my office, I'm losing 30 lakhs a day. So he went to Japan, they were paying him 30 lakhs. He says, so government of India invited him that please check industry, petrochemical industry in Cochin. He said, why is making no profit? He said, look here, you're a poor country. You can't afford me. I'm going to charge you 30 lakhs a day. So in 3 days, it's a crore. So I would like to go past all fares and all that paid. I will come for one day, give you the advice and go away. I don't want to take money from a poor country. Right? This is in the days of Indira Gandhi's government. So now he had been in the Cochin factory. This was his 4th day. He was a very angry man. He was sitting in the boardroom all alone with a grumpy face. So the head of this institution, he said, look, before we sit in, there's that angry man there, we don't know what to do with him. You go and talk to him. So we were a group of about 12 officers with one of our directing staff in charge, Admiral Bindra, and we sat there. So he looked at us, bushy eyebrows, and a huge Texas man, 6'2" tall and about 4 feet wide. He says, who the hell are you? So we said, we are National Defense College, we are here to study. What's the problem? Why are you looking so angry? What's the deal? He says, your country is a poor country. Yeah, I'm charging them 30 lakhs a day. This is my 4th day. I'm feeling upset that I'm taking your money away when you have no money. Right? We said, what's the problem? He said, I gave my advice in the first 5 minutes of arriving there. Now that government is examining my advice and raising 10 questions every day and asking me not to go till I have answered those questions. I'll give you an example of the questions. He said that this petrochemical industry can be run by a maximum of 300 human beings. No, not 300, 150 human beings. It's a highly technical affair. So how many men did the government have? They had about 1,500 men. So he said, get the 1,500 men out, select 150 of your best, and the thing will make profit. Now, government comes back to him, say, but how can we get rid of the 1,500 chaps? I mean, they're very important people. And if you take them away, how will the thing run? He says, I am telling you it will run not by more people, but by less people. It's a highly technical affair. Human beings are not required here. It's just automatic. So like this discussion went on. A discussion started on a sweeper. There were about 10 sweepers over there who had to go and sweep the place and keep the bathroom clean and all. Not 10, it must have been much more. It is a huge establishment. So one of his advisors, get rid of all these chefs. Government said, how could you get rid of the sweepers? Who will clean the toilet? He says, the officer will clean his own toilet. What's wrong with that? You need a brush and you need a thing, you clean it. Every time you use it, you clean it. That's it. Why have you got a sweeper to clean it? He said, but that's our tradition. He said, cut out your tradition if you want to make money. He says, what do we do with the sweepers? We have to give them jobs because India is a poor place and somebody's got a job, we can't take the job away. He said, well, all right, to take them out of the campus, make them dig trenches every day and fill them up the next day. Dig them every day and fill them up every day. That's a job. And pay them. But if you want profit, out of the campus. This is sort of example. And he's there very angry that I'm here for 4 days and government of India can't understand what I'm telling them. Just give you an idea how the administration of a business or an activity which is a big factory has to run. In private industry, since you're paying salaries, only the minimum number of people are kept. You take some of our banks, for instance, AB and ABRO, they're all on computers. There's no peon.
Correct.
You want to take state something to your colleague, you type on your computer.
Yeah.
Or if you've got a file or something you want to take with you, there's no paperwork. But if you want a file, you pick it up yourself and go across to the judge's cabin and give it. Why do you want to be in there? Yeah, some of our private industries have got onto the thing. We knew what ITC, India Tobacco Company, for instance, did when tobacco was to be cut down. They got all these ITC hotels and ITC fashions and ITC industries. They had to get rid of almost 50% of their workforce.
Right.
Gave them a golden handshake and sent them off. See, so we have to learn in government about lesser men doing a bigger job. All right. So now in the training of the military, since you get a wide view like this, you understand not only industry but also workforce management and all that sort of thing. The bureaucrats don't have anything because they're stuck in that job with that one degree that they got with the kids. Maybe a MA or maybe a MSc or a PhD. So what? You really learn on the job. And on the job is only the job you're doing. But you haven't got the brain to see what else is happening along in the whole world. You see? So I just wanted to describe for a little while the type of training that you do in the Indian military, which makes us a little more efficient than the average human being in our country, especially the officer corps, because they are leaders. I must inform you, I don't know if I've told you this point, that when Indira Gandhi was to declare the emergency, her police could not control the riots in Delhi. You know, in the riots in Delhi, the opposition group got together. I think I've told you about this. The riots in Delhi, when emergency was imposed. This is imposed in 1975. And what you found was that anybody who said anything against the government was chastised or caught. Sedition charge and all that, in jail. And newspapers used to be published, Times of India, Hindustan Times, all the top newspapers with huge columns blank. You know, in the front line where you put all the headings, 3 columns, totally blank. And they say, government of India has cut these out because they had officers sitting in every newspaper office. Anything said against the government was removed. You see? So whole editorial pages where the editor wants to say something, blank. So removed by the government of India. Did you notice? That put a lot of anger into all of us, including the military. This is not the way to function. You see? And Jai Prakash Narayan was the leader of the group fighting away. The police couldn't control the riots in Delhi. So Indira Gandhi called the army chief. The army chief was General V N Rena, call him Tappy Rena. Married to a French lady, though he's of Kashmiri origin. A very strong-willed and very dedicated officer. And he was the army chief, totally loyal to the government. And he was there with Indira Gandhi only for a few months, and then he was there with Morarji Desai as the prime minister. But when he had taken over and Indira Gandhi had declared the emergency, she called him and she said, General, we want the army to be deployed to control all the riots in Delhi because the police is failing. So he's a very, what shall I say, diplomatic human being when he's dealing with the prime minister. After all, she's the boss. And he says, Madam, the point is that according to the law, we are not required to use the army, according to the constitution, to suppress riots. That, of course, we come to aid to civil authority for terrorism and things like that. But for genuine disgust of the political world against orders by the government, it's not correct for the government to use military force just like the British did, to shut down the words that the opposition is saying. Democracy is that we have to hear everybody. And he says, because of this, there is danger that even if I give order to my army commanders and my officers, they may contest because they're very well read in the law, Indian Penal Code included, because our military law is based on the Indian Penal Code. So we study all that. And right from cadets in the academy, we're studying the law. And so there is quite clearly stated that this is a democratic country. So I would suggest you don't call the army, it may have a wrong effect within the army itself. They may refuse orders. So what I'll do, if you like, I'll replace on the border 2 battalions of the border security force, in Punjab border, with military people, and I'll send the border security force 2 battalions to you. They're policemen. They don't have any such idea. They are the servants of the politician. You tell them to jump, they'll jump. If you tell them not to jump, they won't jump. Maybe they'll do your work. So she agreed with that because he had put it across to her correctly. And so the army never entered under any circumstances to control any of the riots during the emergency. See? Just one example. This army can do that because it is not politicized. And it's the duty of all citizens to understand that we must not allow the politicization of the Indian military. That means interference in the way they select their people or the way they go up in higher ranks and things like that, or to only get those loyal to a particular party to be promoted and not promoted and all that, because every promotion has to be accepted by the Ministry of Defense. So press is very, very alert on this. The moment they get the slightest whiff of something incorrect happening, there are headlines all over the place. So we are very happy that in India, we have a very vociferous press. I must tell you that in the National Defense College, there were certain papers produced. Now, I told you about General Thapar, who was sacked. If you take his elder brother, his children and us were friends, he was a medical man, and he rose to the Director General Armed Forces Medical Services after superseding my father, who was head of the Army Medical Corps. He was a year junior, but he superseded because my father had refused to allow the son of the defense minister to come into the military. Baldev Singh was the defense minister, and he wanted his son to become a military officer. So now this man, I was on the same selection board as him in 1947 and early 48. There was this huge fellow. I mean, his flesh was hanging around all over the place. He couldn't walk straight because his thighs would clash against each other. So he used to walk with his legs apart. And in all the very physical and mental things that are tested in the selection board, he failed in everything. We could see that. And yet he was passed because the person in charge of the selection board was screwed. You could have passed the defense minister's son. But when he came to the medical board failed him. So defense minister approached my father, who was the head of the medical corps, director of medical services, known as in those days in the rank of major general. Nowadays they're all lieutenant general. He said, look here, you have to ask my son. So father said, let me examine this. So he asked the head of the medical board to tell him why this boy had been failed, and he was given a medical report sheet on that board. So father said, I agree with you, he's not fit for the army, he failed him, so he's failed. So then he went and met the defense minister and said, I'm sorry, he's unfit and he will not come into the army. So the defense minister said, it won't be good for you. Father said, that's all right, you can do whatever you think is right, but I also have to do whatever I think is right. He's unfit. He'll die of a heart attack in the first operation that he goes to, and then you blame me for saying, why did you accept him? I'm sorry, he's not fit and he will not do. So father was not allowed to be promoted. And the Thapar, but not talking about the Thapars. There's 2 children of the Thapars, I think, of this medical man. One is Romila Thapar, who writes very good historical books. And the other, I forget his name, is the son. He started a paper called the Seminar, maybe Seminar. It's a news sheet with about 7 or 8 pages in it. Vitriolic articles against Jawaharlal Nehru and the government. Vitriol. I mean, even a Pakistani couldn't write as well as this body. That is available in the NDC, and we studied that. So, what I'm trying to say is that it's a great advantage that we are a democracy, and we have to keep it so. Who keeps it so? I think the military has a very big role to play here, because since we are not taking any responsibility for governance, we are only managing the military, but we are not under the control of various politicians. And we take a dim view of those officers who kowtow to the government. In fact, in my time, anybody who found kowtowing to a minister was axed. We didn't promote him. You see, I don't know what the scene now is. After all, I've retired 30 years ago or 32 years ago. So that was the style then. And we've got many examples of army chiefs who have resisted political orders against opposition. See? So this training that we give to the military is not only a training of how to command men and troops and the strategies that is to be followed or the tactics to be followed, but the overall situation in the country, because you are controlling an armed group. You have to have the wisdom to make sure that this armed group does not interfere in the political sphere. So we don't. By the time we have so many chiefs, including me, when we became many top industrialists and others say, how much money do you want? How much support do you want? Get this idiotic government out of power, because they're not passing especially in the olden days when there was the command economy of Jawaharlal Nehru and greatly assisted by Manmohan Singh, who was then a bureaucrat. He changed his colors under Narasimha Rao when he brought in the 1991 reforms. It was because Narasimha Rao insisted. See? And Narasimha Rao is one prime minister who is never advertised under the Gandhi claim, because he's not a Gandhi. See? So I knew him very well, and he was the foreign minister when I was the chief. Very interesting personality. We'll come to that when I become the chief. But the point here is that the voice of the human being, the opposing voice, has to be heard in a democracy. The opposition in the parliament today has been reduced to nothing, because they've lost their elections again and again, because they're bad organization and because of the single party making all the money. See, but the point is, we need a good opposition, so that whatever government is doing, we see the opposing voice in the parliament, and we as citizens know how to vote after that. Our voting is very good, by the way. And so far, we are supporting the present government. That's good, because they're doing a lot of good work. And I did say earlier in the NDC that we thought there needs to be democracy with a bit of danda. I think this government is doing that, because unless you do that, you don't rise to a certain level. But at the end of the day, opposition voice has to be heard and has to be produced. So this training that we give to our military officers is of that nature. So I thought I'd cover a few of these points before I go on to the next job of being the BGS of 2 Corps. And now 2 Corps was